I am going to jump through and go right over to the slide on our schedule for today. The structure of the workshop. Perfect. Thanks, Sam. So just so you know what to expect going into this, I'm first going to teach you about this communication tool, one that I learned about 10 years ago that completely changed my approach to teamwork and collaboration. And it had a profoundly positive impact on my work life. And next, I'm going to go through each of the 4 styles of communication in detail. We're going to do a team exercise, and I will ask everyone to participate as best they can by putting some suggestions into, I think, what's called the chat box, or the place where you can communicate by typing out your answers. And we'll get to that, and I'll walk you through how. Next, we're going to look at how to identify someone's dominant communication style if you don't know what style they are. I'm hoping you'll know pretty well the styles of those on your team, but what happens when you meet someone new? How do you put this to work? And next, the most important part. So if you're busy or you're multitasking, I would ask that this is the part that you really tune in for. Hopefully you tune in for it all, but this part's important. And this is the part about your blind spots. So we all have them, and I'm going to help you recognize where yours might be. And that is, if I had to choose one thing, the biggest takeaway from this workshop today. And we're going to wrap up with a little bit of a scenario exercise to test your knowledge and see how well it's all sticking. So next slide, please. Are you a good communicator? So it's a huge question. I used to think I was a good communicator. I was clear, I said what I meant, and I was confident in my approach. I assumed that's what it took. And it was only after I learned this framework, these communication styles, that what I realized is that my style is just one of many. And while it can be very effective at times and in certain situations, it actually has its drawbacks. There's moments when it's not as effective, and it actually doesn't work with everyone. So let's look at the communication styles. I'm going to ask you to click 4 times, Sam. We're going to look at the basis of this matrix. Essentially, we've got 2 axes, as you can see, the vertical and the horizontal, and where you fall on each of these axes determines the way you communicate, and thus what style you have, what box you're in. Okay, now it's important to note these styles are generalizations, and it's not a perfect science. So people are too complex, we know that, to simply put them in a bucket and call it a day. You might be one way at work, you might be completely different with friends and family. And that's okay. Okay, that doesn't make this any less valuable. And that's something I really want to emphasize here. Because the purpose of learning these 4 styles is to develop empathy. Seems simple, but empathy for others that are different from us, it will really help us understand the people we work with day to day, the people we live with, the people in our community. And it's from this empathy that we can develop a newfound respect for someone else's strengths that we might actually have previously assumed was a frustrating difference. So here's an example. For those of us who speak quickly, I can tell you that collaborating with someone who has a far slower cadence of speech might feel frustrating. But when you learn why their slower cadence might actually be a strength that you as a fast talker could benefit from in certain situations, you begin to view their slower pace differently. You might start to think, hey, what are they considering? Because they're thinking about this longer, they're speaking more slowly. What are they considering that I've entirely overlooked as I race through things? What have they found that's taking them longer to process that I might have missed? When you start to view differences in communication through this lens, you're going to develop stronger camaraderie as a team. And as a team, you're going to be stronger and more effective. So with that, let's dig in and look at each of these axes in turn. Okay, so on the vertical axis, you saw that we had faster and direct at the top and slower and indirect at the bottom. Now, faster versus slower simply refers to the speed at which someone makes decisions, analyzes problems, walks and talks. Direct versus indirect looks at what someone values more. So it could be clarity of the message above all else, or potentially it's being polite and considering others' feelings. Now, Of course, this is a spectrum, right? So few people actually want to hurt or insult others. We know that. But there's plenty that actually find direct communication unpleasant and would rather take an indirect approach to delivering most messages, even the most simplest messages. So next slide, we have the horizontal axis with guarded and task focused on one end, and people focused and open on the other end. So let's look at that in more detail. Guarded versus open. Now, this is simply the level to which someone openly shares their thoughts, their feelings, their wants, their ideas. Next, we have task versus people focused. So someone who's task focused considers the action required to complete something, while someone who's people focused considers the people involved to complete that same thing. It's the lens through which you see those to-dos, whether it's the people, whether it's the task. So again, these two elements work together because being truly people-focused requires a level of openness to really connect and relate to others. So what I want to convey today, and I'm going to say this a few times, is that every style has its strengths or benefits. Go ahead and click, Sam. But as always the case with strengths, come blind spots. I don't want to call them weaknesses. I'm going to call them blind spots. Everyone has them. So as we describe each style, don't worry at all if you don't relate to every single element of your style, because you can still learn from understanding the other styles. And most importantly, being open to learning about your potential blind spots. We all have them. And the key to this workshop is awareness, being open to finding what yours might be. So we're going to take a quick poll. I am hoping that everyone here has done the quiz. It will really help this. If you haven't, that's okay. You can do it after and find out and then review the deck because we're going to send this to you. But I'd like everyone to answer the simple question. What is your communication style? Go ahead and enter that in and we'll take a look at the results.
Looks like I'm seeing a lot of relators coming through. Equally as many thinkers, directors, and socializers, but definitely relators is in the lead. I think that's a pretty big majority over all the other styles in this so far.
Interesting. Relators and socializers, you said?
Relators and then socializers and are just as socializers and thinkers are actually tied, and then directors last.
Interesting. So I will tell you why that's interesting in a moment when I dive into each style, but that is interesting. And I have a theory, and I'll tell you in a moment once we get the results. Relator. Okay, so I want to tell you something really interesting. So I've worked in technology companies for a lot of my life, and I can tell you that usually in technology companies, it is highly weighted in favor of directors, with thinkers coming in second and almost no relators. And it's an imbalance that I've actually worked really hard to correct on my team because I know how important relators are to a team environment. And we'll go into that in a second, but I can see here that we've got almost half relators. And I can tell you that different communication styles tend to be attracted to different styles or different types of work and different elements of each sector's, I guess, environment, the environment that it creates and the type of work. So maybe you can draw those conclusions when you learn a bit more about what this means. So we're going to step into the next slide and we're going to look at each style in turn. So go ahead and click. We're going to look at each style. You can see where they fit on the matrix. We've got director, socializer, thinker, and relator. So let's dive right in. We're going to start with director. I can tell you that I am a director and I love directors. I get along with them well, but everyone has their blind spots. We're going to talk about that too. So you can see, or you saw in that previous slide, that directors were in the top left quadrant. They tend to be faster and direct and a little more guarded and task focused than some of the other styles are. But what does that look like? What does that mean? So directors tend to be the fast-paced, hard-charging leaders. They focus on results above all else. They stick to business and they like to get things done. Now, they might not feel like they have time to discuss your weekend or build rapport as much as some of the other styles might want them to. The director assumes that being decisive always leads to the best outcome. So they make decisions quickly and then they move on. They tend to get started on tasks immediately. They love action, taking action, getting started. And often they feel impatient, especially in meetings. They may intimidate others with their communication style. But believe it or not, they rarely realize that they have this effect because being direct and clear just seems like the best way to communicate to them. So directors do think people are important, but sometimes they feel they're not as important as the task at hand and the intended results. So how do you identify a director? I want you to start thinking as we walk through these identification points for each style, who on your team do you think might be a director? We're going to do this for every style. So if you have a piece of paper, if you can make some notes in front of you, play along with this exercise because it can be interesting. So it can be your family, it can be people on your work team, anyone. I want you to write down a note. So directors, they're fast talking, they're bold and confident. They tell more than they ask. They interrupt sometimes, often, and sometimes they're not the best listeners because of that. They can be a bit abrupt and they get right to the point. They multitask when they're impatient. They often feel a bit impatient. But before this seems like a big list of negative things, believe me, it's not. You give a director a challenge and they will gladly accept. In fact, the harder the challenge, the more the director is excited to get started. So take a moment. Do you know anyone that you think might be a director on your team, in your family? Make a couple notes. All right, let's move to the next style. So next up, we have thinkers. Thinkers are in the bottom left quadrant. So like the director, they're guarded and task focused, but unlike the director, they tend to be slower. They tend to be more indirect when they communicate. So what does that mean? What does that look like? Thinkers are detail-oriented leaders. They focus on what it takes to get the job done right. The communication style of these thinkers tends to be less assertive than other styles. But like the directors, they're task-oriented. They assume there's a best way to do things and that it's their job to make sure no mistakes are made. They're incredibly thorough and they focus on quality. They often feel rewarded when a problem is solved. And they value a work environment where they can solve complex problems and get things done right. So, how do you identify them? How do you know if someone's a thinker? Again, think about who's on your team as I go through this, because I'm going to ask you to make notes. So, thinkers tend to be more formal in the way they communicate. They have less vocal variety, and they're really focused. They consider facts more than ideas, and they tend to avoid sharing their feelings. They might avoid direct eye contact altogether. They listen very well, right? They're listening for detail. They want to understand all of the details. But one thing thinkers tend to do is they don't necessarily compliment or reassure the speaker, like sometimes speakers might need or want. Now, this might make them seem unenthusiastic about what you're saying, but often they're not. Often they love what you're saying, they just don't show it. So thinkers tend to be slower paced and a little quieter than other styles. They have less hand and body gestures. They might seem a little less enthusiastic in general. They might not initiate conversation. Now, if you have a tough problem, something that has to be done right, something that really is depended on by a lot of people, you can bring a thinker in to help you with that because the quality of their solution will be off the charts. So I'm going to give you just a couple moments to write down any thinkers in your life. All right, let's move to socializers. So socializers are in the top right quadrant of the matrix. So we haven't seen that right side yet. So this means they're fast and direct like the director, but they're open and they're people focused. So let's look at what that shows up like. Socializers lead through their ideas, their creative ideas. Go back one for a sec there, Sam. The socializer's style of communicating is assertive. They're people oriented. They can be fun and energetic, and they're often engaging and a bit dramatic. Socializers really inspire others. They believe that people should feel free to voice their opinions and to think outside the box. They articulate what they feel, not necessarily what they think or what their goals are, like thinkers and directors, but what they feel. They truly enjoy entertaining. They're expressive, outgoing, and self-assured. All right, so how do you identify a socializer? Socializers talk a lot. They have great vocal variety and they're quite animated in general. They tell stories, often personal ones, right? They like to share, they're very open. They share their feelings and their opinions because they feel why not? It's a great way to connect with people. They're loud and dramatic and can be quite fast speaking. They have lots of hand and body movements and can be very spontaneous. Socializers tend to be the fun ones in the bunch. Everyone loves a socializer. Obviously, that's a generalization, but I got to say on my team, it's true. They really tend to be fun and they're great people to work with. So take a moment and think about the socializers in your life and make some notes. Who do you think might be a socializer? Okay, now last but not least, of course, we've got almost 50% of our attendees today as relators. So let's talk about relators. They are in the bottom right quadrant. So first and foremost, they are open and people focused. Relators also tend to be slower and indirect in the way they communicate. So how does this show up in a workplace? They lead by supporting others. Their style of communication is far less assertive than directors and socializers. But similar to the socializers, they're really focused on people. So relators will look after the needs of their team. They will look after other people's welfare, often above their own. And for relators, their feeling of accomplishment comes from when the team does well. They view personal relationships as extremely important, and they're great team players and collaborators. So I hope you guys can see why I said I think that makes sense that for nonprofits and charities, often relators are attracted to that type of work in that environment. So let's look at how relators show up. How do you identify who is a relator in your life? They ask lots of questions. Remember I said the directors tell more than they ask? Well, the relators ask more than they tell. They listen to truly understand. If you've ever been speaking to someone and they look right in your eyes and they nod encouragingly and you just feel like, wow, like this person is so focused on me, there's a good chance that person's a relator. They listen very well, they smile, they're very engaging to talk to because they let you shine. They tend to reserve their opinions and they're warm and less forceful in general. Now, they can be quieter and have slower speech than some of the other styles, and often they have intermittent eye contact. They might have a gentle handshake, and in general, they're quite patient. Anyone that you know, I mean, obviously there's gonna be lots of people on your team based on that survey, but curious who else in your life might be a relator. So we're gonna do a quick activity now. And what I'm going to ask is that if you can participate, it will be greatly helpful and very eye-opening. So what I would like you to do is answer this question. Now, do not write anything just yet. I'm going to go style by style and ask each style to participate, each group that belongs to the style. So you're going to answer the question in order to communicate with me effectively, do and don't. So the example is do tell me why, don't rush me. So I want you to really think about this. I want you to think about walking into meetings. What do you really like when people do when they're trying to convey information or give you a new task? And what drives you crazy? What things frustrate you? What things do you want people to do and not do when they communicate with you? So I'm going to give everyone a couple of minutes. I want you to start making some notes. I'm going to stop talking and just sit here quietly so you can think. If you can come up with 3 or 4 things for each one, when I return, I'm going to ask you to share your suggestions style by style. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes and we're going to pause right now. So how's everyone doing? Hopefully you've come up with some notes and you've got some ideas of how you want to be communicated with. So for this next section, I'm going to ask Sam to read out the notes. We're going to start with directors, okay? And do not click whatever you do, Sam, because that's going to share too much information and we're not ready for that yet. So stay right here. Directors, everyone who is a director, I would love it if you could add some notes in the chat answering the first question. In order to communicate with a director directly or effectively, with you effectively, what is it that you want people to do? Go ahead and make some notes.
All right, from Tracy, I've got tell me what, where, and when. Make a request. That's from Curtis. Do, be direct. Don't make small talk. Get to the point, stick to relevant information, suggest a timeline. Stay focused, be on task, be clear. Do, bring forward solutions and not just problems. Don't bring me in when not needed. Be solution focused. There's a bit of a theme here. Be clear with requests. Don't ask lots of questions. Tell me the goal. Be responsible, accomplish something. Announce yourself when coming to my office.
This is amazing, guys. This is fantastic. So that's fantastic. Do we want to add some don'ts? I know some people went ahead and did, but just in case you were holding some don'ts that you really want to share, go ahead and throw those in now.
Don't just complain. Don't ramble. Don't demand. Don't beat around the bush. Don't ask, just do it. Don't waste time. Don't storytell. Don't expect answers without background information. Don't make excuses. Don't be vague.
Wow. Okay. I love the directors. Believe it or not, I can relate to everything you guys just said. I'm a director as well. Now, what I want to show you is that I've done this workshop a lot and I did not edit these slides. You're not going to believe me, but go ahead and click the button, Sam, because I want to show you what directors often will say when you ask them about communication so that you can see exactly how consistent these styles can be. And go ahead and click again. We're going to show you the don'ts. So I'm pretty sure that with the examples you gave, most of these were covered. Directors want you to be clear. They want you to get to the point. They want you to be specific. They don't want you to waste their time. They don't want you to speak slowly or repeat yourself. And what I'm going to show you soon is how other styles actually do a lot of those don'ts because they think they're being more effective. So anyone who looked at this list and was shocked and said, wow, that's pretty hardcore. Those directors aren't messing around. This is going to be eye-opening for the directors too, because I want to show you how all of these amazing qualities in certain situations can actually cause friction in other situations. So let's move on and look at the socializers next. Socializers, can you please add your do's and your don'ts? We can probably just do them all together. So some do's, some don'ts. Sam, go ahead.
All right. So Nicole says directors are super intimidating. My boss is definitely one. Mine too, Nicole. So for socializers, clear goals, make it exciting, smile. For me, I love a bit of a story tell. Ask me about my weekend, Kat. Absolutely. Let me share. Do praise something that I've done. Be flexible. Work quickly and efficiently. Doesn't have to be perfect. Be friendly. Indulge in my stories. I resonate. Learn fast. Brainstorm. Innovative ideas. Do tell me why. Timely responses. When discussing business, get to the point.
All right.
For me, it's let me share. Be precise in what you want. Don't assume I know.
Amazing. So go ahead and click those buttons again, Sam, and we're going to show you what socializers around the world have said. Very similar. You guys are great at this. Thank you so much for participating so beautifully. So don't bore us. Tell us a story. Keep it exciting. That's what I hear a lot from socializers. They don't want things to be serious and mundane and boring. They want to keep things energized and entertaining because that's the world they live in. And to be honest, it's not a bad place to be. Now, socializers want you to be clear and honest and value authenticity. There's a lot more feeling words in what they want you to do and not do. Whereas the directors were all about efficiency and tasks. So you can see it really coming through in these lists. So let's move forward and look at the thinkers. So thinkers, can you please share? I'm going to ask you to do your do's and don'ts together at the same time. Go ahead and make your notes.
So for thinker, we have do give me context, do provide details, provide a due date, provide goals, be clear and concise, let me think, do tell me the problem and question you want solved, give relevant information or info, talk about what has been done or tried, and understand why the problem is important. Give me goals, give me a time frame, give me time to process this information, allow me time to process. That came through twice in a row. Don't ask me when it's due. Don't be indirect, hide, issue, attack, or expect immediate decisions, or don't go off topic too much. Don't generalize things.
Fantastic. All right, go ahead and click the do's and the don'ts for thinkers. Now, we're going to touch on this in a minute, but I think you're probably already seeing how exactly what the directors and socializers said, speed up, don't go into detail. The thinkers are now saying, we want all the detail, don't rush us. So we're going to do relator next because there's so many relators on this call and I want to make sure we spend some time on that. And then we're going to move on and look at unintended friction because that's really where all of this starts to be valuable. So next up, we have the group of relators. That's like 42% of you guys, which is fantastic. So do's and don'ts, go ahead.
Do be affirming, be honest, make eye contact. Don't explain things in layman's terms. Stay on topic. Don't rush me or interrupt my thoughts. Give me time. Be authentic. Share your opinions. Tell a story about yourself. Be supportive. That's a big one. Explain so I can see the full picture. Ask for my input. Make me feel important and part of the team. Don't ignore me. Don't complain. Give me time to answer. Give me room to breathe. Provide details and give me time to process and figure things out. Be honest. Keep me in the loop. Be open to feedback and be friendly. Don't assume I know what you're talking about and don't be demanding. Don't be rude. Don't scream at me. Let others speak. Don't exclude me from decision making. Do know that I am there. Don't control the meeting. Do give details. Don't look away and take another call or text. Use good eye contact. Don't shout. Collaborate with me.
This is amazing and so different from some of the other styles. Go ahead and click the 2 buttons there, Sam. So I'm pretty sure most of these were covered. I heard someone say, don't be rude. There were a lot of feeling words. Relators really want you to recognize that they have feelings. They're humans. They want you to be sensitive to that. And I heard someone else say, ask me for my opinion. The director and the socializer might not need to be asked. The relator loves it when you ask. So we're going to talk about that and how important it can be to really understand these nuances and try to meet people halfway so that those unintended friction points don't happen. So let's jump into the next slide because I want you to see how different these styles can be and how someone with good intentions can unknowingly frustrate someone else. So it's all about empathy, right? If you understand strengths, which we're going to cover in a second, you'll start to see where your blind spots might be causing friction without even realizing it. So let's look at this friction, okay? I've put the director's do's and the relator's don'ts side by side. So the director wants you to have deadlines, wants you to multitask or let me multitask. Be quick and to the point and be direct and clear. The relator says, literally, don't multitask. It's rude. Don't rush me. And please don't be rude. I'm sensitive to that. And don't put pressure on me. So you put a director and a relator in a room and 2 people with great intentions who want to work together and come to the same wonderful results are actually struggling. And it's not because they're not both brilliant people. It's because they have different styles of communication. So let's look at the next slide. Socializers do's and thinkers don't. Be honest and open. Give us time to chat. Keep it fun and entertaining. Keep it quick and summarize. And what do the thinkers want you to do? They say, don't go into this personal stuff. Stay on point. Don't get off track. Don't leave things vague and summarized and ambiguous. Give me the detail. And most of all, don't rush us. Thinkers and relators don't want to be rushed because they're going deep. They're doing the quality, in-depth work. Directors and socializers, they want to move quickly. They get impatient. They're doing the high-level work. When you start to recognize that those are each strengths, but in certain situations create blind spots, that empathy allows you to work better with different people on your team. So what are these strengths? Let's quickly look at them. Directors' strengths. They make fast decisions when decisions are what's needed. They take the lead when others hesitate, and they get things done. They take action. Relators. They include others. They make the team feel respected. That is hugely important and often undervalued in business today. Relators are aware of unhappy team members, often before it's too late to help. A director might not see that. The relator, they pick that up. They can really help keep the team going and happy. Relators can foresee problems with people before they occur. Socializers, they inspire others. They inspire others to get involved, to connect to a mission or a goal. They can sell a vision. Often socializers are drawn to sales roles or fundraising roles. They keep things fun and high energy. So let's look at the thinkers. They solve complex problems with quality solutions. They find the right answer, not any answer, not the fast answer, but the right answer. Sometimes you need a fast answer and you need a director on the job. Other times you need the right answer. They can work at a problem for hours or days without getting bored. So what I want to tell you next is really critical to this, because as we go through each style, blind spots are this big takeaway. And I want you to remember something important. Strengths in one area are actually what create blind spots in another. If you don't have a lot of strengths, you actually might not have a lot of blind spots. I want you to think about the people you know in this world that are so strong in one area. Think of like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. They have massive blind spots, and it's their strengths that create this. So I'm not going to ask you to try to fix your blind spots. We're not trying to make them go away, but we are trying to help you recognize where they are. It's not possible to be incredibly task focused and efficient and also be equally people focused. It's just not. So I don't want you to even try. If you aim to eliminate your blind spots, you're simply going to mute your strengths, which makes it less valuable and makes you less valuable and authentic, right? So what I want to suggest is that you learn how to work with and trust others on your team who you know have their strengths in the areas where you might have blind spots. So let's look at blind spots. The director's blind spots. They can ignore and undervalue feelings. They can miss signs or indirect communication altogether. They assume everyone else is being as direct and clear as they are. Why wouldn't they be? So when someone's being indirect and trying to deliver important information, sometimes the director doesn't see it, and that's okay. But when someone suggests that they're not seeing it, the director needs to recognize that blind spot and pay attention. So directors can get wrapped up in being so busy that they lose sight of the purpose. They can be impatient. I'm sure everyone knows an impatient director. And they can make decisions sometimes before they have enough information. Let's look at socializers. Socializers can miss the details. They can miss deadlines because they get so wrapped up in a story or a chat. They can start things and then fail to finish them. They can pull meetings off track, and they can distract others from staying on task. Thinkers. So thinkers can become stuck over-analyzing things. So we know that directors underanalyze, thinkers overanalyze. There's a time and a place for each one. They can feel they never have enough information to make that decision and move on. They convey little enthusiasm for others' ideas, even if they really like the ideas. And they can be risk adverse when risks are actually what's required. So relators have blind spots too. They can frustrate others with their need to consider feelings at all costs. Sometimes they take too long to take action because they become overwhelmed, trying to avoid conflict and maintain peace. Now, every plan is going to have areas that aren't perfect for every person involved. The relator will try their best to ensure it is perfect. And sometimes that can be overwhelming and take too long. Relators can also hesitate when action is sometimes what is needed. So for this slide, I'm going to ask you to participate. You can write things in the chat box, or you can just think about it. We're going to move quickly through this, so don't worry about reading any answers out, Sam. So what I'm going to ask you to do, go ahead and click 4 times, Sam. We all have, or here are the 4 styles, as you can see. And now that you better understand strengths and blind spots, I want you to think about, click once, Sam. It might be twice. Let me see. So I want you to think about how a thinker or a relator might help a director and a socializer. What things could a thinker and a relator do to give them some support in areas where they might have blind spots? Go ahead and click, Sam. That's right. So a thinker and relator can help slow down the director and socializer. They can help them think through things more carefully when they're going to miss details. 2 more clicks. Now we're looking in the other direction. How does the director or the socializer help the thinker or the relator? Well, they help them make faster decisions. They push them to get things done. They say, hey, you've really spent great time on this problem, and I love how thorough you're being, but we need to make a decision and get it done. I'm going to help push you with that. How do the socializer and the relator support and help the director and thinker with blind spots? Well, they can help them be more people focused and understand the true value of emotion, connection, building rapport, all the things that socializers and relators do naturally. Directors and thinkers might have blind spots around. So show them when they're having a blind spot, and the director and thinker have enough awareness to recognize that they should probably listen. Now, last but not least, we have the director and the thinker. Now, how can they support socializers and relators? Well, they can help them get things done. They can check things off their list, and they can move initiatives forward. So that's highly generalized, obviously, but as you become more and more familiar with this framework, you're going to start to see how you can support your colleagues and your family members in areas that they might not realize that you see something they don't. So now you can understand your strengths and your blind spots, but how can you work best with others, especially if they don't understand these same things? Go ahead and click, Sam. We're going to move to the next slide. So the answer to all of this, we never want you to be unauthentic. We never want you to dilute your strengths and try to make your weaknesses stronger, your blind spots stronger. But what we do want to suggest is that you meet people halfway. So it's all about empathy, right? The goal of working with others isn't to change who you are, but by having empathy for their style, you can actually recognize, hey, I'm going in to meet with a director. What is it that I could do differently so that, we minimize friction? So you have that list. I asked you to make that list previously of all the people on your team and in your life who you think may be different styles. So here's some notes that each style might want you to do when you communicate with them. Okay, so a director, they want you to be fast and get to the point. They want you to be confident. So relators might say, ask me for my opinion. You're going into a meeting with a director. Maybe you offer up your opinion and just say it, knowing that the director will appreciate it, even if it's a little harder for you. You might come with a solution ready. You might say, hey, I'm going into this meeting. I know this person's a director. I'm going to spend a couple minutes coming up with a solution and show them all my options before I get into that meeting. You want to stay efficient, right? So maybe the thinker wants to hash things out and dig through all the details. You're working with a director, leave some of those details aside and summarize points. It can take practice, but it can be very effective. And if you really want to appeal to a director and win their hearts, show them that you support their goals. Take some time and actually walk through how you support their goals, and they're going to love you for it. So next, we've got thinkers. What do thinkers want you to do? They want you to be thorough, very different approach. They want you to use logic and reason. They want you to refrain, and this one's really important here, refrain from making quick changes to a plan. Directors and socializers, They can wing things, right? Because they're less thorough. So they're like, let's try this. We're going to scrap that tomorrow. We're going to do this. You're going to drive your thinkers and probably your relators crazy with that approach. They've thought through so many elements that you haven't even considered. Changing the plan on a whim is really hard for them. So be respectful. Give your thinkers time to prepare. They will show up better able to participate and feeling more confident if you gave them time to think through things. Give them that time to think and respect their personal boundaries. If they're not up for sharing, if they give you a few word answers when you ask about their family and their weekend, that's okay. Move on. Don't belabor the point. They don't need to connect that way. They want to solve problems. They want to think through things. So again, what's most important to a thinker? Show that you support their thoughts. Show them how appreciative you are of their deep thinking and their problem solving. Next, we have relators. They want you to ask them about their ideas and opinions. If you're going into a meeting, there's relators on your team, take some time to say, hey, what do you think about this? How do you feel about this? Use feeling words. It works for them. Don't rush them. Relators need some time. If your tendency is to interrupt and you're in a room with relators, hold that back. Do your best to not interrupt them. Remember, you're trying to have empathy for their style and meet them halfway. Give relators time to prepare and take genuine time to get to know them. Learn about who they are. They're more open. They want to share with you. Now, you can confide in a relator, you can speak authentically, and you can truly trust them. Most of all, relators want to know that you support their feelings. And finally, the socializers. If you're in a meeting, a bunch of socializers are in the room, you want to motivate them with principles, goals, ideas, vision. They get really excited about that. Don't bore them. Keep it entertaining. Tell them a story. Keep it fun and moving along. Share your ideas and feelings with them and show your enthusiasm for their ideas, because above all else, socializers want to know that you support their ideas. So we're going to wrap things up after this. We have a few exercises to do where I'm hoping you'll be able to apply your newfound learned understanding of communication styles. So I'm going to read this scenario and then I'm going to ask you a few questions. We've got two people, they're in an office. One's named Kyle and one is named Paul. So Kyle walks into the office and says, hey, Paul, how was your weekend? Paul says, good, Kyle, what's up? Kyle says, I wanted to run something by you. Can we schedule a time to chat? And Paul says, sure, now works. What's up? They move over to a meeting room and sit down. And Kyle says, so how did your son do at that baseball game? Paul says, good. What is it you wanted to talk about? Now, Kyle is visibly flustered and says, oh, right. Yeah, okay. I wanted to suggest that we go a new direction with the way that we approach the client. I really feel that they're going to want more information before we ask them to commit to anything, especially the way it is. And I'm really concerned that we may lose them if we push them too soon. And Paul says, oh, no, I don't think so. It can't hurt just to ask them. Is that all you wanted? And Kyle says, yeah, thanks for your time. So what I want to ask you is, what style do you think Kyle is? We're going to start with Kyle. And then we're going to ask, what style do you think Paul is? All right, Kyle. Kyle was the one who asked how the weekend was and had the insight about the client. So which style do you think Kyle is? Go ahead and vote.
All right, so it's looking like Kyle, everybody believes to be a relator, and it's looking that Paul is a director.
Wonderful. You guys have got this. That is correct. That is very insightful. Wow, nice job. So Kyle is a relator and Paul is a director. So let's move to the next slide and look at how we think they're feeling, okay? Because that's what this is about. So after this interaction, Kyle is feeling rushed. He's feeling frustrated that Paul didn't listen to him, and he's actually unsure of how to get through to Paul. Kyle feels unsupported, and some trust and rapport was really weakened by that interaction. So let's look at how director Paul is feeling. So Paul is feeling a little irritated. He's slightly annoyed that Kyle wasted his time. He wished Kyle had just told him directly when he was sitting at his desk. He's already moved on to something else. He's thinking about something else. But subconsciously, Paul might actually hesitate to bring things to Kyle in the future because he'll fear that Kyle will take too long on what he deems irrelevant things. Now, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about this unnecessary and unintended friction. So what do you think the outcome of this is with the client? Well, I can tell you that they lose the client. Kyle saw the nuances in their behavior. He was able to ascertain that the client was feeling frustrated, nervous, unsure. He was able to pick up on these cues, and that's a blind spot for Paul. Now, if Paul had done this workshop, if he understood his blind spots, he could have leaned on Kyle. He could have said, yeah, that's something I know I'm not as good at. But instead, what's going to happen is they're probably going to avoid working together because they find each other frustrating. Kyle doesn't push for his feelings to be validated. The plan goes ahead. They lose the client. So what I want to look at is how this scenario could be very different. How could you have done this the right way using communication styles effectively? Well, Paul recognizes that Kyle's a relator. He understands that. So he knows that he can probably offer some insight into something he knows he has his blind spots around. He takes the time to listen and to acknowledge Kyle's idea, even if the delivery takes a little longer than he might like. Now, Kyle, on the other hand, knows that Paul is a director, so he works hard to get right to the point. And he even comes prepared with some alternative solutions, things that they can do instead of asking the client to commit. Now, Kyle could actually lean on Paul to help present his idea in a way the rest of the executive team, most of whom are directors, will really hear it and appreciate it. And the result is they keep the client. So I have one last activity. I know we've got 2 minutes left, so we might go a few minutes over. Hopefully you can stay. I want you to think through team dynamics for this next activity. I want you to think through this scenario. It's an annual company roadmap meeting. So, any organization or company can do this. It's where you go off-site and you actually think through your plan for the year ahead. What projects are you going to run? What things are you going to achieve? What goals are you trying to hit? What milestones? So it can be a detailed process, right? You got to go through and look at all of the plan for the year ahead. Now, in this scenario, 8 people go to this offsite to create their annual roadmap. You have 4 of them as directors, 0 relators, 1 thinker, and 3 socializers. I want you to think now, what gets done well, and where might some blind spots be? What things might get missed? So I'm going to go through this and give you some ideas, but I want you to start thinking through that. Feel free to write in the chat if you like, what things get well or get done well. We're just going to take 1 or 2 suggestions for each. Now remember, we have 4 directors, 3 socializers, and 1 thinker.
All right, we've got decision making as something that gets done well. No more questions. So quick decisions. Yep, decision making seems to be a very common thread here. Not really focused on others because they're goal and task oriented, but also with the socializers there provide some great entertainment. Things are definitely getting done with those quick thinkers. It's very action oriented. Yep, problem solving might not be as prevalent. That's a blind spot. The task completion, though, on the other hand, is way up there. Fun.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to jump in just in light of time. So what gets done well? Well, remember, socializers are still people focused, right? But they're not detailed focused. So people will be considered, but just like the directors will consider the tasks, the socializers will consider the people, but not thoroughly, not in the kind of depth that might be needed in order to ensure that the plan is done in a way that there will be no roadblocks and no issues going forward. So I can tell you that the thinker in that room is probably really frustrated. The thinker feels annoyed that the socializers are pulling things off task, even if they're keeping it fun. The thinker's annoyed that the directors are flying through problems without really spending time digging into them. And the thinker's probably right. But the thinker's probably going to be outvoted. 4 directors and 3 socializers. That's a powerful, bold room with a lot of competing energies. And I can tell you that they're going to get things done, and they're going to get things done on time because the directors will ensure of that. But when they bring that roadmap back and they present it to the company, there's going to be some people that are feeling frustrated because they recognize things are overlooked. They're going to realize that some people were not thought of, and we're probably going to be a little disgruntled with this plan as it is. So the last exercise for today, we're going to flip this over and we're just going to change the dynamics of the team. And the reason I'm doing this exercise is because I want you to understand the dynamics of your team. And I want you to understand what things you guys are continuously either overlooking or doing really well and celebrating, but not recognizing your blind spots for because of the makeup of your team. The more balanced your team, the more healthy it will be. So 1 director, 4 relators, 5 thinkers, and 1 socializer. What gets done well and what might be a blind spot?
We've got thorough and detailed, absolutely. I'm also going to hazard a guess and say that because it's thorough and detailed, yep, Danielle echoes my sentiment, the deadlines will be missed. The decision may not be made all of that quickly. It's very people oriented in that room with the relators and the socializer, but the blind spot again being no decisions would be made.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's going to be incredibly thorough and detailed, but they're going to spend too much time taking consensus, collaborating, getting everyone's opinion that they might miss the deadline altogether. They might come out of that weekend away and only have half their plan completed. And the plan that is completed actually might not be the best plan for the organization because they're trying to do it to include every potential individual involved. And they're really thinking through the people and the tasks. And I see someone wrote boring. It might be, probably not for the thinkers, but the director and the socializers are probably going a little crazy and yawning. So again, it's all about empathy. Know who's in the room and do your best to acknowledge, do your best to understand where they're coming from and to appreciate their strengths, even if they feel a little frustrating in the moment. So that's a wrap. Go ahead and click that next slide. We've got basically this understanding that best decisions are made with input from everyone, all the different styles. If you were to design a perfect team, you'd have an equal contribution from all the different styles. I know life's not perfect like that, but having empathy is a great place to start because each style has its strengths, each style has its blind spots. And your power really comes from recognizing your strengths, being aware of your blind spots, and then collaborating to be better. That's all for me today.
All right, thank you so much, Tazzy. We actually have 1 question if you have a minute to answer it.
Absolutely.
And so this is from an anonymous attendee, but are there any ideas about communication modes for different styles? I'm a socializer and prefer one-on-one communication, either in person or over the phone, but others prefer emails, texts, or IMs. Do you have any kind of framework for that?
Yeah. So off the top of my head, and this is kind of a generalization, I have found that thinkers sometimes, because they tend to be less open and people focused, they tend to prefer email and instant messaging, whereas socializers and relators want to see a face. They want to connect. I feel like directors can go either way. They want the most efficient mode. So whatever's fastest and quickest and get things done, that's the one the director will choose. But keep in mind that sometimes thinkers really don't want to be on camera. And you can encourage them to do it if you think it's important, or you can respect that that's less comfortable for them. And maybe everyone goes off camera if it's not something that's necessary for the meeting. So I think it's, again, about appreciating the styles and having empathy. If someone doesn't want to go on camera and you're a socializer or a relator and you're like, why wouldn't they? This is insulting. Just realize it's probably not about you. It's probably their comfort level. So I think figuring all of that out just comes from a place of empathy and understanding of the different styles.
Absolutely. Like I said, this training has changed the way that I speak both to my friends and family, but also to the team that I work on and manage. And I know we went a couple minutes over today, so thanks everybody for sticking around. That concludes our session for today. Thank you so much, Tazzy. This is such a practical workshop, and every time I attend it, I leave with new tidbits. And hey, this time I actually helped to run it, so yay. I hope everyone learned something about how to ease workplace friction. And if you want to bring this workshop back to your team, we actually also offer these personalized workshops as a part of our continuing nonprofit support. So I just wanted to remind everybody again that the session was recorded. You'll be receiving the recording along with Tazzy's slide deck by the end of the week, if not towards the end of the day. Our next webinar will be on Tuesday, June 22nd at 10 a.m. or Pacific time, or 1 p.m. Eastern time. And there you'll learn what makes a good logo, what opportunities exist for using it, as well as how you can get your logos to work better for you. There's a sign up link for that in the chat. And finally, don't forget to take advantage of our limited time offer of up to 25% in savings, which Toby has also popped into the chat. So thanks again, everybody. I'll see you at the next webinar, and I will pass it off to Tazzy for a final goodbye.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Sam. And thanks everyone for attending. I really hope you can put this into use and that it can change your workplace environment as much as it has changed ours. So really glad you could all make it today. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.